Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back my friends, I am Raghunandan Sengupta taking this course for Total Quality Management. So, this is lecture number 2 and as you know we will have about 40 lectures each of half an hour for the 20 hours series in Total Quality Management. So, let me start from where we left. So, now if you remember we have considered the different dimensions of quality and I did give you some examples how the concept of quality could be perceived and could be understood in very simple terms so that it will make sense for the customer or for the set of persons who have purchased that product or that service, based on which you can understand the concept of quality which is there with that product. Product means both tangible and intangible goods or the services which are there. To further this discussion, let us consider the different type of definitions of quality, and if you do remember I did mention that even though we will be considered quality from a mathematical concept, but quality has much bigger consequences and implications. It may mean the level of life which you lead, it may mean also level of type of teaching which you do, it may also mean the type of time schedule which you follow, it may also mean to the level of efficiency which you do work, everything would basically have a quality. It may also mean by that type of person you are and how you interact with your customers or how you interact with your juniors or how you interact with your seniors. So, everything has a concept of quality inbuilt into the system. So, that many things may be expressed when we are discussing and many things may have to be perceived by you as a person when you try to analyze quality for those different type of products or the services which you are giving or which you are getting from different type of persons who are giving the services to you. So, definition of quality would be that how good and how good the product is and how fit it is to be used. So, the first would be fitness for use of the product or the services. So, if you have purchased say for example, a scooter, coming back to the Bajaj scooter examples, or say for example, you have purchased a fridge, coming to the Godrej fridge example, or you have purchased one services say for example from McDonald's or say for example from Pizza Hut, or you have purchased some product from Amul, this milk supplier, or say for example the ice cream supplier, and you want to find out how fit the product is, whether the expiry date for the consumable products are over or whether they are within the expiry date, or whether the packet which has those products, whether a pizza or ice cream, whether they are torn or if they are damaged. So, obviously, whether they are being fit to use, obviously that would be one important characteristic based on which the definition of quality would be rendered. So, that would basically consist of two things: fitness for usage. Point number 1 would be quality of design. So, how good or bad the design of the product is, and what would be quality of conformance based on which what you want that product to give you or the service to be given to you. So, quality of design would be, say for example, all automobiles will have the same basic objectives of providing transport, safe transport, yet they are different in terms of size, different in terms of shape, different in terms of performance, different in terms of maintainability, different in terms of say for example price and cost of fuel, amount of safety features which are there, all these things. So, obviously design would basically render these qualities concept in a very distinct form for consider the product which is now there in an automobile. It can be say for example for a fridge. So, how good is the fridge in cooling, what is the actual utilization of electricity, or where how frequently does the fridge needs to be repaired or serviceability is required, or if the temperature fluctuation in the outside, like in the room where the fridge is kept, whether that varies very heavily or up and down of the maximum and the minimum temperature is very high, then whether the fridge is able to perform its actual functioning. So, those would be the concept which we will consider under the quality of design. And quality of conformance would be how well the product conforms to the specifications required by the design. So, depends on the choice of the manufacturing process, types of process control, inspection activities, etc. are there. So, our product has been designed, consider you have designed, say for example, a brush, and the brush is, the bristles are not very hard, they are soft. Whether they, even if they are soft, obviously it means that it is doing its actual work which is required to be very soft on the gums. But if the bristles are not able to clean your teeth, obviously it means that the actual functioning for the brush, which is basically conformance of cleaning your teeth, if it is not being met, obviously it would mean the level or the definition, the quality for which you want to put to the brush is not being met. Or say for example, you are trying to utilize a bicycle and try to find out what is the conformance of the bicycle with depending on the level of quality it is. If say for example, the conformance are that if the bicycle is not able to take the load of even one person, obviously it means that level of quality definitions based on which you are trying to analyze that product which is the bicycle is not being met. So, definitions of the quality to further consider, it would be the above definitions does not emphasize the focus on the customer. It basically means that customers would definitely, sorry to make it a very bold point, customers may have different levels of quality. So, say for example, I may be a person, I am very finicky about the way the car works, or some person may be very finicky about the level of maintenance or yearly maintenance you want to spend for that car, or some person may be very finicky about the overall luggage space which the car has. So, obviously different customers have different levels of satisfaction based on different levels of product they are going to use. Even if they are the same product, the level of satisfaction would differ depending on the different type of aspects of the product I am going to consider. So, when I am trying to consider the level of quality or the definitions of qualities, they should be a datum based which I will try to analyze the product and how the product conforms to its actually functioning for which it has been built. So, coming to this word, the quality is basically inversely proportional to the variability. So, the better the quality is, less is the variability of the product, or say for example, less is the actual amount of time needed to basically repair the product, or the durability of the product is very high, or the robustness of the product is very high. So, obviously it would mean the proportion of the variability for this durability being very high or robustness being very high would mean variability is low, variability being low means quality is very high. So, if variability of an important characteristics of a product decreases, the quality of the product increases. So, less the variability, as I mentioned, better would be the quality. Variability here refers to unwanted variability, which basically when you are trying to analyze in a very layman terms is basically the white noise or the external influences of the influences which are not at all required. So, say for example, if I am considering again coming back to the fridge or coming back to the heater, if the temperature fluctuation in the environment is very high and if the trip switch of that actual heater or the functioning of the fridge basically fluctuates very heavily, which means the variability is very high, which basically gives us the concept that the level of quality for those products is basically low. Definitions of quality to consider it further focuses on the customer requirements of less variability. So, obviously a set of customers example which I gave for the car, somebody wants less cost, somebody wants less maintenance, somebody wants more luggage space, somebody may require more safety, somebody may require more number of passengers to be seated in the car. So, obviously different customers have different levels of needs or different levels of requirements. So, when we are focusing on the quality of any product or any services, obviously I would be giving examples, or if you have listened very intently to all my examples, maximum of them are from different spheres of manufacturing products. Obviously, it does not mean that the examples are not there on the service sector, but I will definitely come up as we proceed for those type of examples which are there in the services sector also. So, coming back to the last point, it focuses on the customer requirement, and the level of the customer requirement would basically mean that their requirement of less variability. So, the type of customers who are there, they have the same level of satisfaction or same level of requirement from that product or the services, such that if there is variability, maximum of the customers would be affected, such that you can say that the level of the quality for that type of product for which the average customers is being affected is definitely high, which means it will have a implication that the level of quality or the definitions of quality which you are trying to utilize for that product or the services is definitely on the lower side. So, coming back to the level meaning of the quality as a final goal. So, it means basically the customers and the producers perspective depend on each other. So, how the customer, if I am a buyer of a food product from one of the vendors who is there in the locality. So, I would basically, if I place a heavy level of trust on the quality and the price of that product to that vendor, it means that the level of satisfaction is much higher, which means the level of quality which I am getting from that vendor is higher. Or on the other hand, say for example, if I as a vendor, I am supplying different type of products to one of the factories, and if I think the overall payment period by the company takes to pay the bills for the products which I am supplying, or say for example, the level of quality inspection which they do is as per the general norm, and that is actually according to the satisfaction of both the customer and the vendor, obviously means the level of quality implication between the customer and the vendor is much higher. The customer would always consider the perspective of quality from the price. Price means the net worth which I am getting. So, obviously, it does not mean only monetary terms, it may mean that even if I am able to pay higher price, if the level of quality or the level of working competence of that particular product or working competence of the services which I am getting meets my requirement, I am willing to pay that actual high price, because I get the level of satisfaction of utilizing that product. While the producer's perspective would be always on the cost. So, I would always try to reduce the cost of making that product or giving the services, and the consumer would always try to basically pay the least price, pay the less price in order to get the services or the products. So, in general, the consumer's view must dominate, because you as a producer are supplying some goods or services to the customer. So, if you are basically the person who is giving the services, you should always look into the picture that what actually the product which has been designed, whether it is able to meet the requirement of the customer, who are the main person or set of person who buy your product or who buys your services. And obviously, you may be able to see, for example, build the best machine, best car, best fridge, best scooter, best washing machine, best mixie, whatever it is, but if it actually does not meet the requirement of the customer, even though it may be very sophisticated, obviously it defeats the whole purpose in trying to manufacture those type of products. Or say for example, if I think that I am able to serve the actual services of consider from the point of view of the custom from the hospital, if I am able to get the best services, and the patient is cured, but obviously if the cost is very high, then it may becomes a deterrent for the patient to utilize the services of the hospital for which I am basically giving the hospital services. So, obviously, in these cases, whenever we try to analyze any problem from a customer and a producer's point of view or a service provider's point of view, I will always consider the customer's point of view in such a way that the quality would be based on the fact that how the customer analyzes the overall product or the services which he or she is getting. So, let us consider an example. So, as an example, consider an automobile company in US received transmission parts, and these what I am mentioning are actual some real life examples. I will come to that later on, but I am just trying to basically analyze what are the highlighted points from the point of quality for different type of products or different type of services. So, an automobile company in US received transmission parts from a domestic plant and from a Japanese supplier. So, analysis of the transmission cost for the crude products produced in USA and Japan. So, there was basically a huge difference in the cost between the two sources. So, if you see the figure 1.1 which is shown on the screen now, it is basically, if you remember when I started of the class, I mentioned that all of the examples until unless stated, they are all from Montgomery, which is basically the basic book based on which this course has been designed, Douglas C. Montgomery, about the concept of quality. So, if you see in the concept of the costs for the transmissions, so the costs are given on the y axis, the metric is given is dollars, but obviously I am not going to the actual values. So, if you see and along the x axis you have the two countries, one of the suppliers being United States itself, the internal supplier from the same country, and another was Japan. So, if you see the cost perspective, the costs of Japan was about, in this figure as it shows, is 1/3 of the total cost of the United States. So, obviously it will mean the level of cost with respect to the services which are being rendered or the products which are being rendered by these two companies, company 1 and company 2, where company 1 let us consider is USA, company 2 is in Japan. For company 2, obviously the costs are much less. So, obviously if I am the customer, I am getting these two products, my main aim would be reduce the cost and get the same level of quality or same level of services for the products which I want to buy. To identify reason for the differences, the company selected random samples. Random samples I am just utilizing is for the first time, but I will obviously come into the definition of random samples later on. So, what we mean by random sampling, I am just now explain that in very simple logical terms. Consider that you have a huge set of population. Populations means the all set of observation which you have, and you pick up a sample randomly without any predetermined way how you pick up. And if the random samples are, say for example, they are n in number, the small n can be 50, can be 100, can be 125, can be 150, whatever, depending on how you basically design the sampling plan. So, sampling plan means the how you pick up the samples. So, the company selected random samples from the plant, disassembled them and measured the critical to quality characteristics of these two products. So, obviously it would mean that if it picks up two random samples, the cost in the first case for customer 1 was high, customer 2 was low. Customer means who are basically giving it to the vendor in USA. So, based on the fact that when you consider the critical to quality characteristics, it may mean that the actual level per unit of the product which you are trying to utilize may be higher for customer 2 than for customer 1. Then a very objective decision has to be taken whether product 1 or product 2 which is being supplied by customer 1 and customer 2 are better or are they are worse. But if you look at the graphs as such, customer 2 would obviously mean that it is able to supply the transmissions at a much lower cost, which is about 1/3, which I noted down. The units manufactured, so continuing the concept of quality for this example, the units manufactured in USA took about 75% of the width of the specification, while the manufactured in Japan took up about 25% of the width. Considerable less variability is there in the Japanese product. Now, when the product was picked up from both from the customer 1 which is in USA and customer 2 which is in Japan, the variability was calculated, and the variability was found out. If you have listened to me when what I just mentioned about 2 or 3 minutes back, it was about 75% for the US products and about 25% in the Japanese product. Now, with that information, let me come to the second diagram which is there on the slide, which is figure 1.2. Again I am mentioning that has been taken from Montgomery's statistical process control book. Now, in this figure, along the x axis, it is now no longer the country, this is basically the measure metric which you are basically trying to measure. Measure may be strength, measure may be durability, number of hours upwards, but transmission line can work before it fails, transmission system in the car, or say for example, the length of the tie rod which you are basically you are trying to utilize as a transmission system, it may be say for example thickness of the rod, whatever it is. So, we measured that along the x axis, and along the y axis basically we have the actual frequency or the relative frequency or the probability graph which is being measured for both the products separately. So, coming back, so let me come to the slides. The first one which you have, which I am marking now, is with the black one is for the United States. So, obviously, it means the average value which is there is being met, which is the target. But if you see the variability of the product, which is the more broadened part of the dumbbell shaped curve. So, this is the dumbbell shaped curve which we know is the normal distribution curve. It is much higher, which means the variability is very high for the US products. But if we consider the Japanese products, if you see the variability is much low, in that case it would mean that the overall type of the variability which we want for the products which are there for being supplied for the Japanese market or the customer is much low, which I mentioned, if you remember, the variability was about 25%. So, obviously, it means the level of satisfaction the customer now I am using the word of the customer is actually the person who has bought these two products, one from Japan and one from US. So, that customer satisfaction level is much higher by using the Japanese product, hence we will definitely say the level of quality is being met for customer 2, which is the Japanese supplier. So, continuing the discussion, if you see the second point, it means the considerable less variability is there in the Japanese product. So, as per Jack Welch, who was basically the CEO of General Electric for a long time and who was considered a very stalwart or considered a very important person in trying to basically revamp or turn around GE. So, it says the customers does not see the mean, they look at the variability, and the higher the variability obviously would mean the worse the quality of that product is, lower the variability means better the quality of the product is. So, obviously, if the variability is very high, very low around the target, so which if it is not removed, so which means that the product which is being supplied by customer 1, which is the US company, would be bad level of quality, and for customer 2 who are the Japanese firm, if for that the variability is very low, it will mean that the level of quality for that product is much higher. So, the next question comes, and as we know, we have already read in literature, we see many a times in books, we see many a times in different type of manufacturing products. And if you remember in the first instance of the first class, I did mention during World War II and later on, Japanese products were not at all considered as very good products, and while the durability and the reliability of the German products, still now the German products are considered of very high quality, but obviously the overall scenario of the Japanese products has really changed. They are considered less costly and definitely much durable and to a much higher level of reliability considering their costs. So, the main question comes out is that why and how did the Japanese do it? So, obviously, it came up after World War II and later on when the different type of industries from in US, the steel industries, the car industries were taken over and replaced by Japanese firms. Obviously, the question started coming in that why did the Japanese and how they were able to do that. So, why the question can be answered. So, basically they reduce the variability and that leads to lower cost. If you read the first figure where the costs were given on the y axis and the countries were given on the x axis. So, lower the cost means it would basically lead to lower availability for the Japanese customer or the firm. Japanese gears ran much more smoothly for this transmission line, as I mentioned. The tie rod or whatever is being utilized for the car industry or the truck industry or the LCV industries. Japanese gear ran more smoothly with less noise and hence had a higher perceived quality in minds of the customers. So, these are the example which I am giving in the actual analysis which has been done, and based on that I am trying to basically highlight the important point, not trying to basically go into depth, but give you the highlighted points which are specific to the quality with respect to customer 1 and customer 2. So, the last point was that fewer repairs and warranty claims were there which means less rework. So, if the number of complaints for the Japanese product is less, obviously it means less work by the Japanese firm, which means the products which are being utilized and which has been supplied by the Japanese are working on a higher level of reliability, higher durability level. It also means that reduction in the wasted time and effort on money is much less, such that the products can be utilized, considering the fact that the level of quality perception and actually, which is true for the Japanese product, is much higher. So, the question comes is that first was how, why, and next question is how. So, for the Japanese, quality improvement basically means reduction of variability in processes and products. They also focused on reduction of the waste materials, because if waste is very high, it would basically add up onto the cost. So, the amount of wastage, amount of spillovers, amount of residues which are basically coming out from the processing plant when you are manufacturing, say for example, this transmission tie rods, if they are less, obviously it would mean that per unit utilization of raw materials you are able to utilize that and manufacture much more number of transmission rods than your customer one, which is basically the US firm. Specifically pertinent to the service industry would be improving the service process, leads to a less effort and time in correction. So, if you are considering the service industries and considering that you are delivering pizza, so obviously if you deliver the wrong pizza, it means that you have to again rerun your whole process, which means a huge amount of loss of time, huge amount of loss of customer, huge amount of dissatisfaction among the customers, huge amount of cost incurred. So, obviously they would lead to a lower level of quality satisfaction amongst the customers who are getting your services. Quality characteristics, if we consider, so quality characteristics can be of different types. So, what are those? I will just consider that. So, okay, just to take a break, but I want to say that whatever things I am considering, if you remember, I did mention in the first lecture also, I had mentioned in the second lecture also in the beginning, that please consider Montgomery's book as the Bible, based on which you can at least understand the concept. It is a thick book, you have to basically spend a lot of time in trying to understand that, but if you understand the concept, it will really bring out the flavor of quality which I had been mentioning time and again. So, quality characteristics basically would mean elements that describe what consumers perceive as quality. Quality referred to would basically be related to critical to quality characteristics, which would be, it can basically to do with physical characteristics, which mean be length, weight, voltage, viscosity, amount of resistance, so on and so forth. It may also basically be related to the sensory perception like taste, appearance, color. It may also depend on the time orientations, basically it may deal with respect to reliability, may deal with respect to durability, may deal with respect to serviceability. So, quality in engineering is the concept that sets the set of operations and managerial and engineering activities that the quality characteristics of a product are at a nominal or required level, and the variability around the desired level has to be minimum, such that is able to meet the quality characteristics for which it has been designed. So, with this I will basically end the second lecture and then continue our discussion about quality levels, quality metrics, and all the intricacies in the quantitative as well as the qualitative aspect for quality as we proceed in lecture 3 and so on and so forth. Have a nice day and thank you.